Aaron is with a company called The Retail Coach, and we partnered with them about 3 months ago to kind of do an in-depth study of Muleshoe, of the surrounding areas, and really analyze what we have to offer. But also, what are we losing? Where are those opportunities? And so Aaron does a really good job and has been in the area. They've made about four trips to Muleshoe in the last 3 months. So they have been here. They know the community now, and I'm hoping that you take this information and really use it for what it was intended, and that's for your benefit. So I'll turn it over to Aaron. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Casey. It's good to be here. I just gave a presentation at the Rotary Club meeting where we just really scratched the surface of kind of what we're working on, where we're at, what we put together for the community. We're about 3 months into a year-long project, and really have had a chance to really do the analysis. What is the opportunity? What opportunity exists here at Muleshoe? Looking at who is the customer? Where is the customer coming from to shop here and eat here? We know people are coming from outside of the community, so we're excited about this partnership. And just so you know, my background, I'm Senior Vice President with the Retail Coach. I've been with the Retail Coach going on just about 10 years. Before the Retail Coach, I worked for a number of national retailers doing site selection work. So we'd go in, identify the opportunity for these national retailers, and then open up a store there. So that's my background. We do about 90% of our projects through the Retail Coach in Texas. We work all over the U.S., but like I said, about 90% are in Texas. And we really focus on that small to medium-sized community. So that's a little bit about our background, but I'll go ahead and get started here. The first part of our process was really trying to understand who is the customer that shops and that eats in Muleshoe on a regular basis. Where are they coming from to shop and eat here? We know they're coming from outside of the city limits. So we've started. This is just initial results that you've seen up here. We're going to come back for multiple times to do this, but we've done a license plate study. It's scary to think about, but I can go into your parking lot and I can scan license plates, and it'll actually tell us your home address, okay, where the car is registered to, where you're coming from. Scary to think about, but you can see from a retailer's point of view, or a site selector's point of view, really understanding who that consumer is gives them factual data to say without a shadow of a doubt, this is who our consumer is. You've got grocery stores that'll track that information as well. A lot of times the grocery store, if you have a rewards card with them, or they'll ask you for your zip code, that's what they're doing, is they're trying to figure out where you're coming from, what items you're buying, really trying to keep track of that. So we do that as well by using a license plate analysis. This is just preliminary results. We're going to be coming back for multiple trips, but you can kind of see where that consumer is really coming from. And based off of that license plate analysis, and also talking to some of the retailers from the restaurants and just looking at competition in the area, we've identified this yellow area up here as what we call the retail trade area. This is where about 80% of the consumers that are shopping and eating in Muleshoe come from, is within this yellow area here. So about 80% of the consumers. You can see, it extends a certain direction towards Littlefield. It extends a certain direction towards Clovis. Extends further down to the south into more of the rural areas, same thing up to the north there. But it's not a radial, it's not a drive time. A lot of the retailers that you'll see they'll say, how many people live within a 10-mile radius of Muleshoe? How many people live within a drive time? What we do is we use our license plate analysis, and we also look at credit card information to find out factually where consumers are coming from. And this yellow area here represents about 80% of those consumers. So our analysis and what we did going forward in this project is we really focused on that entire yellow area. In that trade area, there are about 11,520 people living in that trade area. So more than double the population of the community. Okay, 11,520 people make this their primary retail home. Now, are they spending all of their money in Muleshoe? No. They're going, whether it's to Clovis or Littlefield or Lubbock, they're spending their money other places. But this is who that consumer is. Looking at median age here, I thought this was a little bit interesting to me. Is your median age is about 33.7, and that's a little bit younger of a population. Okay, especially with the rural areas that we picked up in that trade area, I was expecting the age to be a little bit higher. But it wasn't. It's a little bit lower. I looked at a couple of different data providers, data sources. So it's a younger population. It's proven that younger people are more willing to spend their money out on retailers, restaurants, those sort of things. So interesting information there. Average household income was about $53,575. Median household income $41,351. Those are all on par with the state average. So numbers look good as far as that goes. This is just a snapshot of demographics. There's roughly 100 pages worth of demographics information that we pulled, where it gets as far as how many cars people drive, what types of jobs they have, how much money they make. So a very detailed demographic summary is available. I'll show you at the end of this how you get access to those reports. But just wanted to point out the major factors in the demographics. Just remember 11,520 in the retail trade area. That's that number we're using going forward. Once we had determined the retail trade area, the demographics, where consumers were coming from, we wanted to find out, of those 11,520 people, how much money are they spending on retail goods and services, how much opportunity exists here that's not being captured here. So we ran what we call, it's got a number of different names, but a gap analysis. You might have heard it referred to as a leakage analysis. The way I look at it is as an opportunity analysis, okay? If there's retail leakage in a community, that's money that's leaving the community and being spent other places. So what we did is we looked at about 85 different retail sectors. Everything from sporting goods to grocery to restaurants has a category that you fit into. Potential sales, we looked at potential sales. So of those 11,520 people, what are they spending not just in Muleshoe but anywhere? That's the potential. And then we compared that to actual sales. What's actually happening within the city limits of Muleshoe? So potential sales was $157 million. Okay, a little bit more than $157 million. Then we compared that to actual sales over the last 12 months. We got that information from the comptroller's office in Austin. Actual sales were about $35 million. So what that gave us was a leakage of about $121 million that's leaving Muleshoe on a yearly basis, or leaving the trade area on a yearly basis, being spent outside of Muleshoe. So that's a lot of money, and that really opened my eyes to see that information. The key here is to realize you're not going to capture all $121 million, okay? But if we can reduce this leakage by 10%, and that's working with Economic Development Corporation. Casey, when you say that, that's what we talked about our goal being, was let's try to reduce it by 10% over the next 2 to 3 years. That being the goal. I think that's an attainable goal. That'll bring that leakage down, like I said, by about $12 million. That translates into a lot of retail sales tax, a lot of retail sales in the community. Translates into keeping people here. So some of the categories, so $121 million in leakage total. Some of the categories that really stood out to me that people are leaving town for. There's a leakage, I think, in almost every category. Maybe there might be one or two there wasn't a leakage. But a couple of the categories that really stood out to me was pharmacy and drugstore leakage was one of the categories. We saw about $6 million in leakage as far as pharmacies and drugstores go. We saw a lot of that leakage occurring going to CVS, Walgreens, those types, and other places. We saw clothing stores had a large leakage. Clothing stores is about $6.1 million in money that's leaving on an annual basis. Once again, you're not going to be able to capture all of that because, I mean, think about people that, are they going to dealers in Clovis, or are they going to Lubbock, those places. So you're not going to be able to capture all of that. But even if we could reduce that clothing leakage by $1 million, or a little bit more than $1 million, that would be tremendous. So before I go forward, let me mention this. While we were here, we've made 4 trips, not just me, but my team has made 4 trips to the community. We asked people, what do you leave town for the most often? So number 1 response we got was casual sit-down restaurants. And you've got some great restaurants here. I've eaten at a couple of them, but a lot of the people, especially the younger population, likes to go, whether they're going to Clovis or Lubbock, to eat it at sit-down national brand restaurants. So we heard that from everybody. That was the number 1 response we got. Number 2 was clothing. People leaving for clothing. Heard that a lot, especially from the high school age kids, middle school, high school age kids buying children's clothing. $6.1 million in leakage as far as clothing goes. And then we heard a lot about sporting goods as well. Sporting goods, on this next page here, sporting goods was about $1.3 million that was leaving on a yearly basis for sporting goods. And we heard that a lot about, we had some parents tell us, we've got to go other places to buy cleats. for the kids, for sporting events, that kind of stuff. The full service restaurant leakage was about $6 million, about $5.9 million in that casual sit down category. And then one other one that really stood out to me was general merchandise stores. General merchandise, who would fit into that category? Alco would have fit into that category. Obviously, they're gone now. Your Dollar Generals, your Family Dollars, your Walmarts, that's that general merchandise category. You had about $14 million in leakage that was leaving on a yearly basis, going to Walmarts and other areas, general merchandise stores in other areas. So the gap analysis, it's pretty telling. We use that as a tool to help local businesses. There's really a number of ways it can be used, but are you a local business that maybe could expand into another category? Are you not carrying the items that people are buying that they're leaving town for? And then also it can be used to bring in additional retailers, additional restaurants to help fill these gaps. So very powerful tool. This is a model that we developed a number of years ago, almost 15 years ago. And retailers, especially the national retailers, really use this information to help them when they're making location choices. So the gap analysis is pretty telling. I'll just say it one more time, but $121 million in leakage. If we can reduce that by $12 million over the next 2 to 3 years, you'll see a big change here. But if we can keep people from shopping in Clovis, if we can keep them from shopping in Littlefield, Lubbock, once or twice a month less than they are now, that's going to translate into a lot of retail sales. So, and I didn't mention this, but as I go along, if there's any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll leave time at the end for questions as well. But once we had determined that trade area, once we had determined the gap analysis, we really wanted to look at the psychographics. And I'm just curious, show of hands, have any of you heard of that term before, psychographics? Okay. So psychographics, it's been around since about 1985, but it's one of the newest. The retailers have just really started grabbing hold of psychographics. We talked about demographics earlier, age, income, those sort of things. Psychographics takes demographics to the next level. So the best way I've heard it described is demographics on steroids. Okay, so instead of looking at me based on my age, based on my income, what psychographics does is it looks at me based on what TV shows do I watch. What items do I buy? Do I buy Kraft macaroni and cheese, or am I buying, the United brand macaroni and cheese? Do I, how often do I leave town? When I leave town, what restaurants do I eat at? When I leave town, what stores do I shop at? So psychographics really tells us what consumers are buying. So what we've done is we've done a psychographic profile of the entire trade area. So you can see on the screen here, every color that is represented in the trade area is outlined in blue, represents a different psychographic segment. Okay, so each of us are broken into one of 66 or so lifestyle segments or psychographic segments. So I was just going to share with you, we put together a profile, and I'm just really going to hit on the top few sectors. We'll let you really dive into the information, but all of these psychographics, all of us are broken into one of 66 different segments. For example, the largest category in Muleshoe was this category here, prairie living. Prairie living, most rural market, about 1% of households. It says located mainly in the Midwest, but the other area where they're located a lot is in Texas. Agriculture communities, married families, single family dwellings. Median household income is similar to the U.S. income. I talked about how your incomes that we pulled are very similar to the state, to the national average. Faith is important to this hardworking market. Find time to relax, outdoor activities. So this is just a slide, but what our analysis does is it goes into very much detail. And I'm going to show you in a little bit how to really dive into this information. Southwestern families was another category that made up a large segment of the population here of the trade area. It talks about the working age population, blue collar occupations. Skilled work, building maintenance, spending is focused on the family and at-home entertainment. Like to gamble, casinos, lottery tickets, but it'll actually get in and it'll actually show you what items people buy. Okay, so there's the ability to run what we call propensity reports that'll show us people living in this trade area are 10 times more likely than the average person in Texas to buy a certain item or to eat at a specific restaurant. So we've done a thorough analysis on the psychographics. So I want to share with you in just a little bit how to use that information. Heartland Communities was the segment that made up the third most. Primarily homeowners. Many have paid off their mortgages. Children have moved away, but have no plans to leave their homes. Hearts are with the country and a slower pace of life. Outdoor activities, community events, traditional and patriotic. Thought it was interesting. I talked about that consumer propensity report. People living in Muleshoe are 3 times more likely than the average person to drive a pickup truck, which makes sense because of where we're located here in Texas. So, a lot of good information here. I want to, Valley Growers was another one. A few of those were made up here, but I want to pull up, and I'm going to sit here for just a second so I can pull up this website we've developed. We've developed a website focused on retail for the EDC, and we did this so that it's easy to get the information out to local business owners, but also it's easy to get the information out to national retailers and restaurants. So we've developed this. If you go to retail360.us, and I'll put up the website at the end of this, but what we've done is we've really broken down the leakage into each sector, what the leakage is, the age, the information you're going to want to see on this. But then all of the reports are available for download at the bottom of the screen here. So the gap analysis, the demographics, those are available so you can kind of go through those, see what the information looks like. We did that as we move forward in this process, as we update this information. We're going to continue to keep up-to-date reports here. If there's any questions, we've already had some people reach out to us that are franchisees that are interested in opening up some kind of business or know somebody that is. You can kind of point them in our direction. We'll help steer them towards our contacts we have there. So wanted to mention that because I had a couple of calls last week, people interested in the community. So the website is here. The other thing, and it's going to be complete by the end of the day today, we do a lot of work. We've done a lot of work in Corsicana, Texas, which is just south of Dallas. I'm going to use this as an example. This is what your interactive mapping application is going to look like. It's going to say Muleshoe, Texas. It's actually going to have Muleshoe, the EDC, the logo on this map here. It'll be complete by the end of the day today. But what we've done is, instead of just providing reports to the Economic Development Corporation and saying, hey, here's some reports, we've actually mapped everything. So we've gone in and we've mapped by household, the demographics, the psychographics, so that you can actually type in a specific address. In the address bar here, it has the predictive text on there. You can pull up a specific address. It'll tell you who makes up the area around you, psychographics, those sort of things. But if you click on the Layers tab, which is this one that's highlighted right here, click on Layers. You see all of these different layers that are available here on the screen here. You can actually, we talked about retail spending potential. So we click on retail spending potential here. We've mapped the area. You can see the different colors there. And if you click on Legend, it'll tell you what these colors represent. So this is Corsicana, obviously, but if it was Muleshoe, it would have Muleshoe here to show. So the darker the colors you go, the higher the retail spending potential that's there. Let's see if this will work really quick. So I'm not actively connected to the internet, it doesn't look like, but there's a number of different layers here that you can click on. So if you were to click on tapestry segmentation, this is the psychographic segments. You can actually, if this was Muleshoe, which like I said it's not, you can click on anywhere on the map in one of these colors. It'll actually pull up the block group. It'll tell you what tapestry or what psychographic segment it makes up. You can click on see full description here, and it'll actually pull up a full description of each psychographic segment. So if you're interested to see what each of these psychographic segments mean, it'll pull up a specific PDF report talking about what people are buying, what restaurants they eat at, what items they're buying, those sort of things. So this is a really neat tool. When I was doing site selection, I would have killed to have access to a tool like this. But you can go we could be sitting out in the parking lot with an iPad, and pull up this interactive mapping application, and it'll tell you exactly around you who makes up the community. So it's really, really powerful information. And what we're trying to do with this is give local businesses, entrepreneurs, for anybody interested in doing that, access to the same information that these national retailers, national restaurants are using to make site choices. So any questions on that interactive mapping application? There's a number of different tools. I just clicked on maybe 2 of them. But you can actually measure sites on here. You can email directly out of this. So if you run some reports or you run a map you'd like to pay attention to or share with somebody, there's a number of different base maps you can use, whether it's topographic or an imagery map. So a pretty neat tool to have there. And like I said, we're going to actually, if you go to the Retail 360 site, I'll put it up at the end of this presentation. If you go to the Retail 360 site, we're actually going to have the interactive mapping application embedded on that site, so you can actually work through it right there, or you can open it in its own window. But in a nutshell, like I said, what we are doing, the EDC hired us to focus on reducing that leakage, focusing on keeping people here shopping in the community, even if it's once or twice a month more than they currently are. That's our goal. If you'll remember, $121 million in leakage. Let's reduce that by 12. Let's reduce that by about 10% over the next 3 years. And then we're focused on building local businesses. But then, who else can we bring in? If somebody can't fill that gap here, let's bring in national retailers that will help keep people shopping here. So I went through that pretty quick, but wanted to give you just an overview, access to this information. Really take a look at the reports, especially the psychographic reports are interesting to really find out who the consumer is. You'll probably learn something new. We also talk in there about how to market to specific businesses or to specific customers. Some people do better with online advertising, some do better with direct mail, some do better with radio or TV. So depending on what consumer you're looking for, it gives you tips on, hey, this is the best way to reach this specific segment here. So a couple of things I noticed driving around town and was doing some research for this presentation, and something hit me. I wanted to mention it as well. About 75% of all retail sales happen between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. and on the weekends. And it kind of opened my eyes to see 75% of all retail sales. There are quite a few businesses not taking advantage. Obviously, I don't think you need to stay open until 11 p.m. But
is that number for Muleshoe or?
That's a U.S.
All
average.
retail, okay.
Yeah, that's all retail, 7 to 11, not including online. That's brick and mortar. 75% is between that time period. So I thought, somebody had asked me that question earlier today, so I thought it'd be good in my earlier presentation. So wanted to mention that. But we're excited about this. We're 3 months into the process. We want to come back in front of you when we're further along as well. But I think this is exciting times for Muleshoe because you're going to see some growth when it comes to retail and restaurants, and keeping people here is going to benefit all the local businesses, and that's really our goal. So I wanted to see if there were any questions we might be able to answer. We're going to be back multiple times throughout this process. I think we've already been here 4 times in the first 3 months. So I want to be back in front of you as much as possible.
I will say the Retail 360 site that has all of our information, we can put a link on our EDC site to that. So that will be available, and if there's anything in particular that you need copies of, we can definitely help you with that, but that will be available directly to you, and I'll try to get that up. That's brand new, so I'll try to get that up on the website this afternoon.
Yeah, it's brand new as of this morning. We were able to complete it just in time for this meeting. And we're going to continue to keep that up to date.
You can also provide by email a copy of the
Absolutely.
leakage report or print one out if you want to print it.
Yeah, and kind of our thinking on putting this website together is what we found is we started to try to send out some of these emails. Some of the attachments were really large. So this, in case that becomes an issue, you can download them directly from this website. So.
How do you calculate your numbers?
Sure.
What's your...
So we have, I can't tell you exactly how we do it because we have a proprietary model for doing that, but the way, basically how that breaks down is we look at the state average for each of these categories. So there's roughly 85, we might have added a category, it might be 86, but we look at what is the average Texan spend on each of these categories. And then based off of incomes, okay, per capita incomes here versus state per capita incomes, we either adjust that number per person spending for each of these categories, either up or down. You were almost right on with the state average as far as your numbers go. So it's a per person spending for the state, then we take that to the region, then we take that to the city, and multiply that by the total population in the trade area, and that's how we come up with potential sales. Actual sales, we get that information from the comptroller's office. So at the end of the year, and I know as a city you probably get that report as well, but over the last 12 months you were doing about, was it 38, or I think it was about $38 million in sales. So potential sales, that's potential. In a perfect world, if you were to get 100% of those 11,000 people's sales that are in the trade area, that would be that larger number there, and then actuals come straight from the comptroller's office.
So, and you said that you asked people around town, the number one reason you leave town.
Sure.
How many people have you asked?
You know, throughout our 4 trips, what we would do is we would just go into Alco. When they were open, we would go into the dollar stores, we'd go into some of the restaurants where we're eating lunch. So I don't have a specific number. I mean, we probably are up to, with the amount of boards we've met and everything, probably at least 100 people. Just, real informal quizzing. It wasn't a specific survey that we did, but the number one response we got by almost everybody was casual sit-down restaurants, that full service type restaurants. Clothing was mentioned a lot. Even some groceries was mentioned. Some of the people that, even though you have some good grocery stores here, they're still mentioned while they're seeing a movie in Lubbock or those sort of things, they'll go to some of these other places. And I think I mentioned clothing already. And then sporting goods, that came up a lot too, especially with people that had kids or had high school age kids, or really a lot was that sporting goods issue that came up a lot. Those were the top 3. Obviously a lot of other things came up, but that was the top 3 or 4. Where the gap analysis is just one tool to use, and that's what we use to get retailers, restaurants, developers interested in the community, local businesses to use that. But before you open a business or before you do anything, obviously there's a lot more research that goes into that. But the gap analysis, we've used that same model for about 15 years, and I mean it's respected by all of the national retailers and restaurants. And in fact, we've got a lot of clients that are retailers and developers that's their go-to gap analysis. But it's worked. And it tells you a good story. It tells you what the real is, but what the real issues are. But $112 million in leakage, I think is what it was. $121 million in leakage. That's just a large amount. I think if we can get that number under 100, under 100 million in leakage, I think that needs to be our goal. I think that's where we need to look. That's our benchmark we need to set. Is let's get that leakage below 100, and I think we'll be in good shape.
How does that occur?
So, a couple of different ways. It's either local businesses doing more in sales, obviously, national retailers coming in to help fill those gaps. Maybe some of those stores that restaurants people are leaving for. So 12 million, depends on the type of restaurant, depends on the type of retailer. I think the national average for a limited service restaurant is 1 to 1.5 million per store. A full service restaurant, the average sales per store is about 2 to 2.5, depending on who that full service, who that casual sit down restaurant is. Some of your sporting goods stores, the smaller ones, can do about 800,000 to $1 million in sales. So it's going to be a combination of different types of retailers, different restaurants coming in, or expansion of your existing businesses, just additional sales coming in.
So does the EDC take this information and go source retailers and other businesses to attract them to Muleshoe?
Absolutely. So the first thing and why we want to have this meeting so early on in this process was to give the local businesses, give the community, let them know what's going on, let them know what the leakage is, but then also we're going to take it to potential retailers and restaurants that can't be filled here locally by national retailers. So it's going to be a mixture of all of that. The strongest communities are those that have local businesses, have regional businesses, have national businesses. So that's really our focus. And not to speak for the EDC, but that's kind of the focus of the EDC is to look at each of those categories.
You talk about the young kids' clothing, what kind of clothing are you talking about?
Sure, all
What kind of
kinds.
store?
What's that?
What kind of store and what kind of clothing?
Well, we've got several retailers that we're looking out to, so I don't want to name any specific retailers at this point, but clothing, as far as that goes, I mean, you look at what's trendy, you look at what's selling, you look at what people are leaving town for.
I know.
What's that?
I know.
Yeah, so that's the goal, is to focus on those. You know, what's in style. You know, when it comes to, I talked about sporting goods, when it comes to, you know, shoes and cleats and that sort of thing, it's having the Nikes, it's having the Under Armours, it's having the Adidas, Reebok, those sort of things.
The only way you're gonna get that is through the chain.
Not necessarily.
I had it.
Yeah,
I've had Reebok, I've had Adidas, Skechers, I've got Nike, I've got New Balance. I've had, let's see, several.
sure.
And I'll tell you right now, Nike won't sell it to you
They won't.
unless you do 100,000 a year
Yeah,
in just cost.
sure. So it is possible, but it depends on what your level of sales are and how much you do with them. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's got to be those items people are leaving town for. You know, that's the big thing. We heard a lot of it from a lot of people. We did those informal surveys. We heard a lot of people saying, "Well, I just can't find this in Muleshoe," or you know, "I just can't find this specific item that's just not available to buy here." But what was interesting is when we talked to some of these people and we asked them, "What do you leave town for?" They said, "Well, we just can't find this." And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure they have that at this store," and they just weren't aware of it. They weren't aware that some of these things were available. So it's going to be an education process to the public, also to the public consumers, to let them know. And I think local businesses can do that as well, letting them know kind of what items are for sale, those sort of things. But there's just that mentality for a lot of people that, hey, let's just pick up and go to Clovis, you know, one day a week, or let's pick up and go. So that's why I talked about, let's look at reducing that by 10%. I think that's the goal. So, that tells a pretty good story.
I got another question. I'm not completely sold on your potential sales, the numbers you get.
Sure.
Because Muleshoe's not an average. I mean, if you're using it over the average Texan,
Sure.
right? That's how those numbers are developed, am I understanding
Sure.
right? Based on, if our average income is about average of Texas,
Sure.
you kind of cross it over and multiply it by our 5,000,
Sure.
11,000, whatever's in
11,000,
here.
yeah.
So, is it, to me, it's got to be weighted at some point. We can't sustain a car dealership. That's been proven in the past. So where it shows a leakage of 28 million, well, understood that that money is going elsewhere, but at the same time, Muleshoe can't sustain a business that would attract that leakage.
Sure.
So is at some point, are they weighted to where, just kind of like Roger's saying, you can't sustain a Nike dealership.
No way.
So are those numbers pulled and worked with?
Sure. So I think you've got to be realistic in some of these categories too, and realize that you're not going to capture, if it's a car dealership, you're not going to capture all $28 million in sales. But you know, there are car dealerships that come to communities this size. When you have a community this size, depending on who the retailer is, they look at different size trade areas too. So if it was a car dealer coming in, something like that, they're going to probably be looking at even a larger trade area than what we have there in that yellow area there, because people drive further distances to get cars and those sort of things. So it depends on the category. You know, as far as selling you completely on the gap analysis or the leakage analysis, it works. And I mean, that's what your national retailers, your national restaurants are using. There's going to be some, I don't want to say discrepancies, but there, even if it's not, $1.3 million in potential for sporting goods, even if you were to capture 10% of that, that's a huge amount of money. So that's kind of the way we're looking at it. We do use state averages. There's a lot that goes into our formulas for figuring out these individual categories. We also look at what does the average person spend in their region. So we look at the state average, but then we compare that to their region as well. And we know there's certain categories that show up better here than they do, say, where I live in Austin. Okay, so for this community, it might be higher tractor sales, or it might be higher in one category than it is in another. So we do, in a sense, weight those depending on the region you're in, and our formula kind of takes that in. So it just depends on the category. Depending on who the category is, it will depend on what the trade area is. I've been through every sector on the gap analysis here, and I've double checked them, and I've gone through what the state average is, because we actually do our gap analysis by hand, and it should be pretty accurate. you gotta realize, we're not gonna capture all of it, but if we can capture 10%, that's why I said that, even 10% is a huge amount of money.
You know, you talk about the car dealership. That's kind of that market has changed.
Sure.
And I know I bought a truck not long ago, online with email and phone calls from Vernon, Texas, which is 8,000 or 9,000. But they sell vehicles all over the United States. And they delivered it to Muleshoe. I never left town. So car dealerships like we
Yeah, and that's
think about now are what we used to have. Is
Right.
different.
yeah, and that's one category where it is getting harder, especially with the online sales. I mean, you can buy a car in California if
Yeah.
you wanted to.
And they'll bring it right to your door.
And they will. So
But they could also sell it out of Muleshoe.
they could. So we work in a lot of real small communities that still have car dealerships. You know, it just depends on the volume of that dealership, what they're
If
looking
you're just
to
gonna
do.
target those 11,000 people, it won't work.
Then no, but if you're targeting the region,
Yeah.
then it can definitely.
You know, we do the same thing to the city. There's certain car dealers that bid through the state contract,
Sure.
and we buy, and they deliver it. So it's. I'll say one thing. Before, when ED was looking at going with Retail Coach, I called the city manager in Navasota. I worked there 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
and I've known that guy for 20 years. And what he told me, he highly recommended them to me, so I'll tell you this. I can't tell you that we put a business in Navasota because of Retail Coach. But the local businesses have expanded and met some of that gap that was there.
And that would be the first goal for everybody here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nobody wants somebody coming and riding
Absolutely.
across from
Yeah.
them.
And you know.
And that made me feel a lot better about these guys.
Yeah. And now he can tell you about a big one that's coming.
Yeah, you were telling me
but-
that this morning, but.
But that's right. I mean, local money stays in the community. I mean, that's obvious. Money that's spent in local stays in the community. However, there is a key to having that local, regional, national, having all of those together to kind of build off of each other. But like I said, we're excited. I'll stick around if there's any questions, and we're going to be back. We're 3 months into a 12-month process, and it's exciting to see. Excited to see some things that are going to happen, some things that are going to change. And next time we're in town, if we need to meet with anybody individually or businesses individually, that's what we're going to do next time. And Casey, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just want to, well, I guess I do, reiterate that, you know, we brought this to you all first. We appreciate what you're doing in Muleshoe and the hard work that you put in. And I'll try to get that information from that website that he's compiled, so everybody will have access to that. Hopefully I can talk to our web guys and get that going today. Other than that, that's all I can really think of. Again, thank y'all, and this is for you first, and I hope everyone is not scared by bringing anyone else in when it gets, or if it gets to that chance. You know, a lot of times I may go to Lubbock because of the choices I have. So I think we can pull in a larger area, a larger group of people if we have more choices here, and that's good for everyone. So I just hope everybody takes this opportunity, this information, to do whatever you can. And if you have any questions for Aaron or I, we'll be around.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Awesome. Thank y'all for coming. I've got cards over the front to you, so it's got my cell number on it, my email. So if there's any questions after this as well, give me a call or shoot me an email.